I'm Jennifer, the Inquiring Quilter, and welcome to another episode of Intelligent Quilting, where I teach you the reasons behind quilting methods so you can choose the one that works best for you. This episode, I'm talking about the tools that I like to use when making flying geese. Let's see, the first method for making flying geese is the stitch and flip method, or connecting corners, and that is a method in which you're going to be marking squares. So one of the first things that I like to recommend is markers. If I have a light fabric that I'm trying to mark, I will use just a regular pencil, a mechanical pencil. I happen to like this one. It's by Pentel. If I'm marking dark fabric, I need some kind of light color, so I use a white fabric marker by Sew Line. I like it because it has a nice sharp point, and so it leaves exactly the right size line. It's not too big, not too small, and it's not going to throw off my accuracy. When I'm marking the connecting corners or flip corners, I use just a short 1x6" ruler. I keep this by my sewing machine because I use it so much for various things. But I use this because it's easy to control and keep it from not slipping. And it's easy to mark the corners that way. When you're using the method called Fast Flying Geese, or 4 at a time, you'll also be drawing lines. In that case, it makes sense to draw the sewing lines as well, not just the diagonal lines through your sky fabrics. For that, I like to recommend and use Fons and Porter's quarter seam markers. You just use the yellow line that goes down the center of this tool to align with the corners of your sky fabric, and then you can mark on either side of this, and that's exactly a 1/4 inch. They come in a pair, a long one and a short one, so you should be able to find the right tool for marking regardless of how big the flying geese are that you're trying to make. Similar tool is this one called the Quilters rule. What's neat about it is there's this little track down the center in which you can mark the diagonal from corner to corner, but also you can mark the sewing lines. Again, use a mechanical pencil if your fabrics are light, or use the Sew Line white pencil if your fabrics are dark. In some of the methods, you may be trimming down your flying geese. For the most part, the geese are already or should already be the size they need to be, which is a plus. However, it's always good to measure your flying geese to make sure they're the right size after you've sewn them. So I like to use a good ruler. I happen to like Quilters Select. They have this etched surface on the back that prevents them from slipping, so I like that. Now, I may have mentioned in the intro to Flying Geese, with the 4 at a time or Fast Flying Geese method, the sky squares often are cut at some weird amount, like 2 7/8, which is not impossible to cut or even to do. It's just sometimes when our rulers are marked with the 1/2 inch and the inch, it's easy to forget what we're doing, and also it's a little harder to maybe see the 7/8 line there. Like here's 2 7/8 is right over there. So that's a little harder to see. What I do in that kind of situation is I use this. It's called a Glow Line tape by Omnigrid. It sticks on your ruler. Let me mark my ruler real quick at 2 7/8. See, you just stick it on your ruler. It will adhere temporarily, so you can move it if you need it or whatever, but having this on your ruler will remind you visually what you're cutting at. Here's a trick. If you were to tape it to the back side of your ruler and tape a couple of them, you'll create a ridge that you can butt your fabric up against and cut fast even at 2 7/8. So glow line tape, really like it. Whenever I'm going to be marking my fabric, I like to make sure it's not going to shift as I'm marking. Since I'm going diagonally across it, I may be dragging the fabric with me and it might kind of shift slightly and my line might be off. So I like to use this. This is a Sandboard. It's got a rough, sandy surface to it, and it holds your fabric, it grips it, keeps it from shifting as you're marking. So I highly recommend it for any quilting method in which you're going to be marking fabric, especially Flying Geese. With the stitch and flip method, or connecting corners method, there is a lot of waste. Let me remind you, you're sewing a square, sewing from diagonal to diagonal on the end of a rectangle, and you're folding the corner back up. So back behind this pretty little corner here is some extra fabric. Typically you trim that away to 1/4 inch from your sew line. So that's what I mean by the wasted fabric. What you can do is you can mark an extra line here and create bonus half square triangles, and I'll show you how to do that. You can also use this little guy. He's called the folded corner clipper, and what you use him for is you take your square, lay it on top of your rectangle. Let's pretend that's a rectangle and that this is a square. And then you use this tool to trim off that before you even sew. So you're basically creating this unit here. You're trimming off the other part. And that makes it a little bit more accurate because you've got nice crisp edges that are already 1/4 inch seam allowance included, so that you're not going to mess that part up. And then you've got these little guys now that you can sew at half square triangles later, and you don't have to mark anything. Because I think it's a good idea to trim or at least measure your finished Flying Geese units to make sure they're right. If you do have to trim, you will be doing the trimming on 4 sides. So it's nice to have this. This is a rotating cutting mat. I really use mine a lot, so it's recommended for trimming, and it will prevent you, because it rotates like that. You rotate the goose unit. You're not rotating and cutting. You're not cutting across yourself and accidentally cutting your finger or whatever with the rotary cutter. 2 other tools that I like to use with Flying Geese. The Fast Flying Geese method, where you have to mark the diagonal on your sky squares, and then typically you're also marking your sewing lines. Well, one thing that you can do to stop the marking is to use this. This is called diagonal seam tape, and as you can see, it has a red line and then 2 black lines 1/4 inch from that center red line. You line this up on your sewing machine in front of your needle so that the red line is in front of the needle, and then you clearly have the 1/4 inch lines on either side of your needle, and you just follow the lines. And I'll show you how to do that in the sewing section. The diagonal seam tape is great, and I do use it. However, something that's even faster and more fun is this. This is my sewing laser. It has, as you can see, a little on-off switch, and it's Velcro at the bottom, so it sticks on top of my sewing machine and points down. I can adjust where it points, but it makes a straight line in front of my sewing needle. So just like this creates lines on the bed of my sewing machine that I can follow, my laser does the same thing, and all I have to do is power it on. So, and because it's Velcro, I can move it from machine to machine if I want to. So I will show you when we get to the sewing flying geese how I use the diagonal seam tape and how I use the laser. One last thing. There is another method for making flying geese, which is called the one seam method. And it is by far the fastest, but it results in this unit that you then have to press exactly right. And don't know if you remember, but there's like this fold. You're folding. Before you press, the unit's going to look like that. Then you're going to press the two little sky squares out. And then you have to fold this down to make the goose triangle. So something that I like to use for pressing this as flat as I can and as sharp as I can is a wool pressing mat. You've heard me talk about the wool pressing mat before. I love it because it traps the heat and then radiates it back onto the fabric, kind of double pressing it from the top and the bottom at the same time. So you get, as you can well imagine, a great crease with that. By crease, I mean here. You're able to really flatten this flying goose unit so that it will come out perfect. So I think that's all the tools that I like to use. Now it's time to show you how to make flying geese. By the way, if you're interested in purchasing any of these tools, I'll have links to them online so that you can shop to your heart's content. And I will also have, since there is some math involved in making flying geese, in the description of this video and in all the videos for flying geese, I will include a link to a downloadable PDF file that will help do the math for you so you don't have to figure it out. Well, that's it for now. Those are the tools that I recommend for making flying geese, and I hope you like them too. And we'll see you soon. If you like this video, please put a thumbs up on it. That does help others find my video. If you like me or you like my tutorials, and I hope you do, please follow me on YouTube. That way you'll know when I post new videos, and also other people will be able to find me a little bit more, the more people that like a video. So thank you very much, and see you later. Bye.